The White House, December 7, 1941, 1:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The afternoon light filters through the tall windows of the second-floor study. A half-eaten lunch tray sits forgotten on a side table. Stamp albums lie open. A fire crackles in the hearth. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt sits in his leather chair, legs motionless beneath the wool blanket that covers them. Across from him, his closest advisor Harry Hopkins picks at his food, gaunt from the illness that has plagued him for years. They discuss nothing of consequence: the war in Europe, the convoy routes, the endless negotiations with Japanese envoys that have dragged on for months. The phone rings at 1:47 p.m. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox speaks 3 words that change everything: they've attacked Hawaii. Roosevelt's face does not move. His cigarette holder remains clenched between his teeth. His eyes, behind their rimless glasses, fix on some invisible point beyond the walls of the White House. "No," he says quietly. But he knows the diplomatic back and forth was theater. He knows the Japanese carriers disappeared from tracking 10 days ago. He knows that somewhere across the Pacific, American boys are dying right now. He reaches for a pen, a legal pad. In the next 17 hours, Franklin Roosevelt will make editorial decisions that transform a military disaster into a moral crusade. He will reject the careful language of diplomats. He will choose a single word, one word, that turns a date into a destiny. A date which will live. Not in world history. In infamy. Section 1. The message nobody wanted to send ***. December 7, 1941. 2:05 p.m. Eastern Time. The reports arrive in fragments, each one worse than the last. Knox calls again. Battleship Row is burning. Roosevelt grips the phone. "How many?" "We don't know yet, Mr. President. The attack is still ongoing." 2,000 miles away, the USS Arizona has already slipped beneath the oily waters of Pearl Harbor, taking 1,177 men with her. The Oklahoma capsizes in 12 minutes. The West Virginia burns. The California lists and settles into the mud. In Washington, the president begins to calculate, not casualties, not ships, something else. Words. He knows he must address Congress. He knows he must ask for a declaration of war. But more than that, he knows this moment requires something beyond policy statements and diplomatic protest. The American people have spent 2 years watching Europe burn from the safety of neutrality. Polls show 70% oppose entering the war. Isolationists control key congressional committees. America First rallies draw thousands. One speech, one chance, one moment to shift an entire nation from spectators to warriors. "Grace," Roosevelt calls to his secretary in the outer office. "I'm going to need you." Grace Tully enters with her stenographer's pad. She has taken dictation for the president hundreds of times. She has never seen him look like this. "Sit down," Roosevelt says. "I'm going to dictate a message to Congress." He does not reach for the State Department briefing papers stacked on his desk. He does not consult the draft that Secretary Hull will soon send over. He lights a fresh cigarette. He closes his eyes. And he begins to speak. Section 2. The first draft. December 7, 1941. 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Grace Tully's pencil flies across the page. Roosevelt speaks slowly, deliberately. Each phrase emerges polished, almost sculptural. He has been preparing for this moment, perhaps not consciously but instinctively, for years. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in world history, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan period. Tully writes. She does not interrupt. She knows the rhythm of Roosevelt's composition, the way he pauses, corrects, revises in his mind before the words reach his lips. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government, and its emperor looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific period. The sentences roll out, measured, formal, presidential. But something nags at Roosevelt, something about that first line, something that doesn't quite cut deep enough. He sets it aside for now. There is too much to do. The phone rings again. More reports. The casualties climb. 2,000 dead, then 2,500, 3,000. Reports of additional attacks filter in. Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaya. The Japanese are not striking one blow, they are striking everywhere at once, a coordinated assault across 5,000 miles of ocean. Roosevelt adds these to his text, each new attack another line, each new betrayal another charge in his indictment. But still that first sentence. A date which will live in world history. It's accurate, it's dignified, it's completely wrong. Section 3, the State Department speaks. December 7, 1941, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Secretary of State Cordell Hull arrives at the White House with his own draft. 17 pages long. Hull is 70 years old, a former congressman, a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He has spent months trying to negotiate with the Japanese, and this afternoon, even as bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese ambassadors sat in his office presenting a final diplomatic note. Hull read it while American sailors drowned. His draft reflects his fury and his training. It is comprehensive. It details every Japanese violation of international law. It catalogs every broken promise, every deceptive maneuver, every act of bad faith stretching back months. It is, in its way, magnificent, a complete historical and legal case for war. Roosevelt reads it in silence. Cordell, he says finally, this is excellent. Hull waits. But I can't use it. The secretary stiffens. Mr. President, the historical record must be established. The world must understand. The world will understand, Roosevelt says, but right now I'm not speaking to the world. I'm speaking to Congress. I'm speaking to the American people. I'm speaking to a mother in Kansas whose son is at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. He sets Hull's draft aside. She doesn't need a legal brief. She needs to know that her country understands what happened to her boy, and that we will never forget. Hull leaves the White House at 9:00 p.m. His comprehensive document will be released separately for historians and diplomats. But the message to Congress, the message that matters, remains in Roosevelt's hands alone. Section 4, the word that changed everything *. December 7, 1941, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The White House is quiet now. The emergency cabinet meeting has concluded. The military briefings are done. The casualty estimates have stabilized at a number too terrible to contemplate. Roosevelt sits alone in his study, his draft before him. He reads the first line again. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in world history. He picks up his pen, a simple act. Millions of Americans have picked up pens today, writing letters, signing documents, making notes. But this pen stroke will reshape how a nation remembers its worst day. Roosevelt draws a single line through two words, world history. Above them in his distinctive handwriting, cramped, angular, certain, he writes a single word. Infamy. He sets down the pen. The change seems small, 6 letters replacing 12, but Roosevelt understands something that Hull and the State Department do not. World history is academic, distant, something that happens to other people in other countries, recorded in textbooks that students skim before exams. Infamy * is personal. It is betrayal. It is the hot shame of being deceived. It is the cold fury of discovering that your trust was used as a weapon against you. World history describes an event. Infamy defines a moral category. Roosevelt makes other changes. He crosses out simultaneously and writes suddenly. He removes qualifications, tightens phrases, strips away anything that might soften the blow. He is not writing a speech. He is forging a weapon. By midnight, the draft is ready, 500 words, barely 6 minutes when spoken aloud. It is the shortest war message any American president has ever delivered. It will be the most remembered. Section 5, the enemy perspective. December 8, 1941, 3:00 a.m. Tokyo time. Aboard the aircraft carrier Akagi, steaming north through heavy seas, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo receives the after-action reports. The attack has exceeded all expectations. 4 battleships sunk, 4 more damaged, nearly 200 aircraft destroyed on the ground, the Pacific Fleet crippled. Japanese losses, 29 aircraft, 5 midget submarines, 64 men. By any military calculus, it is a stunning victory. But one detail troubles Nagumo. His pilots report that the American aircraft carriers were not in port. Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, all absent. The carriers survive. In Tokyo, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives the same reports. Unlike Nagumo, he does not celebrate. He has studied at Harvard. He has served as naval attaché in Washington. He knows Americans in a way his colleagues do not. I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant, he tells his staff, and fill him with a terrible resolve. The quote will become famous. Whether Yamamoto actually spoke these exact words remains debated by historians, but the sentiment captures what the Japanese high command failed to understand. They calculated tonnage and aircraft and naval bases. They did not calculate American rage. They did not calculate infamy. Section 6. The Final Revisions. December 8, 1941, 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time. Roosevelt has slept 3 hours. His valet helps him dress in a dark blue business suit, not naval uniform, though he loves the Navy, not formal attire, though the occasion demands solemnity. He chooses to appear as what he is, a civilian president leading a civilian nation into war. The morning papers confirm what Washington already knows. The headlines scream in the largest type fonts hold. War. JAPS attack Hawaii. Hundreds dead in sneak raid. Roosevelt reads them over breakfast. The American people are already angry, but anger fades. Anger can be negotiated, explained away, pacified. What Roosevelt needs is something deeper, something that will last through the long years he knows are coming, something that will sustain factory workers through double shifts and mothers through telegram after telegram. He makes one final revision to his text. In the original draft he had written, I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. Now he strikes the unprovoked and dastardly. Too much, too emotional. It undercuts the careful restraint of the rest of the speech. The facts themselves are damning enough. The word asterisk infamy carries the moral weight. Everything else can be precise, clinical, devastating. Roosevelt understands something that many speakers never learn. You do not need many powerful words. You need one, in the right place. Infamy will do the work. Section 7. The Journey to Congress *. December 8, 1941, 12:00 p.m. Eastern Time. The presidential motorcade departs the White House. Roosevelt sits in the back of his armor-plated limousine, the black reading copy of his speech in his hands. Beside him, his son James, a Marine captain, wears his dress uniform. The streets of Washington are lined with silent crowds. No cheering, no waving. The faces are pale, shocked, still processing the impossible news that America, invulnerable, protected America, has been attacked on its own soil. Roosevelt does not wave either. He studies his text. Even now, even in these final minutes, he is making changes. He has learned over 3 terms as president, over 8 years of fireside chats and press conferences and speeches that reached millions, exactly how words land on the American ear. Short sentences for emphasis, longer sentences for context, repetition for rhythm. Japan has, therefore, undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. 3 sentences, escalating severity, building to the human cost. Roosevelt's lips move silently as he reads. He is rehearsing, timing, adjusting. At 12:25 p.m., the motorcade arrives at the Capitol. James Roosevelt helps his father from the car. The president grips his son's arm with his left hand, his cane with his right, his leg braces locked in place. He walks slowly, painfully, toward the House chamber. The nation is about to hear from its commander-in-chief. They do not yet know that 65 words will matter more than all the rest. Section 8. The Address. December 8, 1941, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The House chamber falls silent. Every seat is filled. senators, representatives, Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, military chiefs in gold braid and medals. In the gallery above, Eleanor Roosevelt sits beside Edith Wilson, widow of the president who asked for war in 1917. Across the country, 60 million Americans gather around radios. Factories pause, stores close, families cluster in living rooms leaning toward the speakers. Roosevelt grips the lectern. He does not smile. He opens his black reading binder. He begins. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The word lands like a hammer. Infamy. Not history, not tragedy, not disaster. Infamy. A wound to national honor, a stain on Japanese character, a crime against civilization itself. Roosevelt continues. His voice is strong but controlled. He does not shout. He does not rage. He recites the facts with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. The United States was at peace with that nation, and, at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. The phrase, "at the solicitation of Japan," cuts deep. It reminds everyone that Japan asked for those negotiations. Japan proposed peace while planning war. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. Roosevelt pauses. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. He lets the silence linger. Let the implications sink in. Let America understand the depth of Japanese deception. Then he pivots to the global scope of aggression. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. The repetition builds like drumbeats. Last night, last night, last night. Each new attack compounds the outrage. Each new target expands the crime. Section 9, The Call to War. December 8, 1941, 12:36 p.m. Eastern Time. Roosevelt approaches his conclusion. Japan has, therefore, undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. He pauses once more. The next words are the ones that matter, the ones that will authorize the greatest military mobilization in human history. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense. He has already done this. Overnight, without congressional approval, the military machine is already in motion. But always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. Remember, the word echoes back to infamy. This is not about temporary anger. This is about permanent memory, a wound that will never fully heal. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. Righteous might, two words that transform the conflict from geopolitical struggle to moral crusade. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Treachery, another moral category, another brand that will follow Japan through the war and beyond. Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. And then the final line, the request that brings America into total war. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. Wait. He had crossed out unprovoked and dastardly, but the words appear in the spoken version. Roosevelt, in the heat of the moment, has deviated from his own revision. The emotion breaks through. The mask slips for just one phrase. Dastardly. An old-fashioned word, almost quaint, but in Roosevelt's voice, in this chamber on this day, it carries the weight of 30 centuries of human disgust for betrayers. The speech ends. The chamber erupts. Section 10, the vote. December 8, 1941, 1:10 p.m. Eastern Time. The Senate votes first. 82-0. Unanimous. Senators who had fought Roosevelt on every domestic policy, who had blocked his court-packing scheme, who had resisted intervention in Europe for years, every single one votes yes. The House follows. 388-1. The lone dissenter is Jeanette Rankin, Republican of Montana. She had also voted against entering World War I. She is a lifelong pacifist. She will spend the next few hours hiding in a phone booth, besieged by angry reporters. But her vote is a footnote. The margins tell the story. A nation that was divided yesterday is united today. Isolationists abandon their positions. America first dissolves within weeks. Charles Lindbergh, the movement's most famous spokesman, volunteers for military service. The sleeping giant awakens. At 4:10 p.m., Roosevelt signs the declaration of war. He uses 10 different pens, collecting signatures, creating souvenirs, marking the moment for history. This is not merely a war, he says to those gathered in the Oval Office. It is a crusade. Section 11, Historical Verdict ***. The infamy speech runs 519 words, 6 minutes when spoken aloud. It is the shortest war message in American history. It is also the most consequential. Historian Douglas Brinkley calls it the ultimate example of presidential crisis communication. In 6 minutes, Roosevelt transforms a military catastrophe into a moral mandate. The change from world history to infamy has been analyzed by linguists, historians, and political scientists for 8 decades. Professor Sandra Silberstein of the University of Washington notes, world history positions Americans as observers of an event. Infamy makes them victims of a crime. That single edit changes the entire relationship between the audience and the attack. Roosevelt understood this instinctively. He knew that Americans needed to feel not just attacked but betrayed, not just damaged but dishonored. Only that depth of injury would sustain the 4 years of sacrifice to come. The speech also establishes a template that future presidents will follow. When George W. Bush addresses Congress after September 11, 2001, his speechwriters study Roosevelt's address. The parallels are deliberate: the short length, the catalog of attacks, the moral clarity, the appeal to righteous might. But the original cannot be replicated. Roosevelt wrote in real time, under the pressure of actual war, with the bodies of American servicemen still floating in Pearl Harbor's oily waters. He did not have a speechwriting team. He had a yellow legal pad and a pencil. And he had a word. Infamy. Admiral Samuel Eliot Morison, the great naval historian who served under Roosevelt's command, later reflects, in that one word, the president captured what we were all feeling but couldn't articulate. He took our shock and our grief and our rage and compressed them into 2 syllables. And those 2 syllables drove us across the Pacific. The speech does exactly what Roosevelt intended. It unifies a divided nation. It transforms the attack from a tactical surprise into a moral outrage that demands response. It brands Japan, fairly or unfairly, with a stigma that will take generations to lift. And it gives the American people a phrase they can carry through the darkness ahead. A date which will live in infamy. Closing, the echo of a word asterisk. December 7, 1941, has now lived in infamy for more than 80 years. The Arizona Memorial floats above the sunken battleship in Pearl Harbor, visited by millions. The names of the dead are inscribed in marble. Oil still seeps from the wreckage, one small drop at a time, as if the ship itself continues to bleed. Roosevelt did not live to see the end of the war he entered that day. He died on April 12, 1945, 4 months before Japan's surrender, his wheelchair pushed into the garden at Warm Springs, Georgia, where he had gone to rest his failing heart. But his words survived him. They survive us still. In classrooms and documentaries, in history books and political speeches, in the collective memory of a nation that learned, on one terrible Sunday afternoon, that the oceans no longer protected them. A date which will live in infamy. 6 words, 65 in the full sentence, 519 in the complete speech. And at the center of it all, one editorial decision, one crossed-out phrase, one handwritten revision on a yellow legal pad in a White House study while the fires still burned at Pearl Harbor. World history became asterisk infamy. An academic phrase became a battle cry. And a single word shifted a nation's perspective from observing a historical event to experiencing a profound betrayal. The pen scratches across the paper. The president lights another cigarette. Outside, the winter darkness settles over Washington. He reads the line one more time. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Yes, that will do.